Welcome to episode 4 of the Spellman Economics podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring a very interesting topic, the economics of wine. And today we have a very impressive guest, Miss Tanisha Townsend. Miss Townsend is the Chief Wine Officer of Girl Meets Glass, a wine lifestyle and education agency. She's zooming in right now from Paris, France, where she teaches courses on wine, creates wine, and food tasting experiences. Additionally, Miss Townsend has a podcast of her own called Wine School Dropout, where she discusses the different kinds of wines, how they're made, and how to differentiate them. I'm sure that today will be very insightful looking at the wine industry with Miss Townsend. So without further ado, we'll have Jenna Wilson, our host, dive in a conversation with Professor Townsend.
All right, so first of all, it's so great having you on today, Professor Townsend. My first question for you is, how did you know you wanted to be involved in the wine industry, and was there a particular moment or experience that sparked your interest in this world?
So we will jump right in.
Jump right
It
in.
was never anything that I necessarily thought about in the beginning, because when I first got into wine, it was just I was drinking it and was living in Maryland at the time. There are a lot of wineries in Maryland and Virginia, and so I would go to wine festivals and wine fairs and just got fascinated with the idea of wine. And so I thought, like, this is pretty cool. I enjoy wine tasting and things like that. So I never thought of it as like a career or getting into the industry or anything like that,
Yeah.
because I had a regular full-time job. I was working in IT security and it paid me well. So I was not looking for anything else. But a chance meeting with a guy who worked in wine marketing, he said, come work with him. And so I did that. And then I really liked it. And I started moving up in that and getting better and seeing myself making strides that I never made in IT. So one thing led to another. And then I ended up in Paris, France, teaching wine.
Wow, that's amazing. I was definitely curious as to how you made that transition from a bachelor's of science in computer science to becoming a sommelier. It's a really, really interesting transition.
Yeah. So when I came to Paris, or when that opportunity presented itself, I was working on a contract, and that particular contract, they lost it. We lost that client. And so they needed to let people go, and they were asking for volunteers. I didn't like them. I didn't like the company. I didn't like the people. So I was like, oh, pick me. I want to go.
Right.
So got a nice little package, left, and was like, okay, now what do I do? And I think maybe like a couple weeks later, the opportunity to Paris came up. Since I was burnt out on IT and, needed to find another job, needed to find somewhere to live, had gotten out of a relationship, I'm like, okay, why not go to Paris and teach this class for a semester? What's the harm in that?
Yeah.
And so when I did it, also did not like that school, did not like the people. It was a sham. But I really, really liked Paris. I liked the people that I met. I liked how creative I was able to be. I liked how there weren't any kind of stigmas or stipulations put on me. I wasn't in this box. And
Yeah.
so to be able to be free to kind of do whatever was really intriguing to me after, all the stuff from there. So
Wow.
that's how the transition was made.
That's amazing. And so, for those of us who aren't familiar, I was wondering if you could give a bit of a look into the history of wine and help us understand some of the basic history as well as some of the terminology and jargon surrounding wine for us laymen.
Okay, so not to go super nerdy or anything, but wine, we're talking back in like 6000 BC. We're
Mm,
talking in what's modern day Georgia, Armenia, Israel, places like that is where wine started. There is a story that they tell of a princess, and her father was mad at her. And so she was just devastated by this. So she was like, I'm going to go eat these old grapes and just die. Well, she ate the old grapes, and since the grapes were old, they were fermenting. So not molded, they were fermenting. So she ate them. Her cheeks were rosy. She was telling jokes. She was fun. The staff liked her. Her dad liked her. And we're like, oh wow, you're fun now. You're really cool. What did you do? And so she's like, I just ate these bad grapes. And so they ate some. And then that's one of the stories of how wine came into existence.
ah,
So
okay.
with that said, Grapes ferment on their own. Grapes are one of the few things, one of the few fruits that ferment on its own without you having to add anything, do anything, and it turns into wine. Not like if an orange ferments, that's mold, that's bad, throw that orange juice away.
Yeah.
But grapes will ferment on their own. They naturally have yeast on the leaves of the vine and yeast on the skins, and so they will give you wine from that.
Mm.
As far as some terminology that you would hear, I think one of the something that you hear most often is wine is dry, and people have a lot of questions about that because they're like, it's a liquid, so wine clearly is wet. Dry is the absence of sweetness. So
Mm.
the absence of sugar. So if something is dry, that means it's not sweet, it lacks sugar. So think of that when it comes to wine. Of course, you know, white wines made from white grapes, red wine made from red grapes. Tannin is another word that you'll hear often. And tannin is kind of this drying sensation. Do you drink tea, Jenna?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so you know if you've left your tea bag in your tea too long, that real bitter, dry flavor you get,
Yeah.
that's tannin. So
Okay.
that occurs in wine. That can happen largely with red wine because it's fermented with the skins, with the seeds, with the stems, and they may age it in oaks. So you can kind of get that flavor. Time will soften that up a bit.
Mm.
So that's another term. I'm trying to think of what else. You know, sparkling wine, wine that has that effervescence to it, champagne. All champagne is sparkling wine, but not all sparkling wine is champagne. It must be from the Champagne region of France.
Mm.
Um,
Wow. That
yeah,
was a
those are
very
just some basic
comprehensive
things to kind of
background.
get you out there.
I appreciate that. It was very helpful. I was definitely
Sure.
wondering about the tannins. I've heard a lot of wine people talking about that, and I didn't know what that was.
And I feel
So
like people will use that word to sound like, oh, yes, the tannins in it.
yeah, yeah, that's what
And
I
I'm
want.
like, no, because I've heard even someone say, like, oh, yeah, you can see the tannins. No, you can't see tannins. You can taste them. So if
Right.
you want to impress your friends and it's a red wine and it, you know, you get that drying sensation, you're like, I sense a hint of tannin in this. You can
Hmm.
throw that terminology out.
Yeah, definitely in a few years I'll try that one out. So let's get into the more economic side of wine and everything. So I was wondering how wine is priced. Like what sort of factors go into wine? Is it time? Is it like a certain area that it's made in? What exactly goes into differentiating luxury wines from more commonplace box wines?
So everything you said, time, location, winemaker technique,
Hmm.
age, where it's from. So not even just where it's from, like largely a French wine or an Italian wine may cost more than, say, a wine from Australia. When you're talking luxury, now you're talking pricing something that's not just from France, but from a particular area within France.
Hmm.
So think like this wine is from the United States, this wine is from Georgia, this wine is from Atlanta, this wine is from Spelman College. So you see how now we have made it such a small area where the grapes are from. You're charging more for that. The price is higher because you have a smaller area which you're picking grapes from. Whereas
Yeah,
the wine from the United States, okay, you can get those grapes from anywhere. It won't cost as much because those grapes, they're
right.
plentiful. Also, things that have a name. Think of the difference between a Coach purse versus a Louis Vuitton purse. They're both leather, but
Mm.
one has a different name and a different kind of stigma or mystique to it. So the same thing with wine. Um, Another thing that goes into pricing is how it's made. If they use oak versus stainless steel, if they age it for 6 months versus 5 years, you will pay for that extra time where they're aging it.
Right.
Another thing, land costs come into play.
Mm.
A lot of places in the US, take California or Oregon, they are still paying for their land. So that cost goes into the wine. Whereas in France and Italy, this land has been in their family for generations. So the land has been paid for already. So
Yeah.
that cost does not have to go into the bottle that you get on the shelf.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really interesting. And so I was just wondering, since you're, someone who's been living in Paris, France for a little while now, I was wondering what the differences you've noticed in the French market versus the market in the US. What sort of like consumer differences you've noticed, things of that nature.
One of the biggest differences is in the American market, you have access to all of the wines of the world. If
Mm,
you want to get something from Portugal or Chile or Argentina or New Zealand, you have that readily available at your wine shop, at your grocery store, places like that. Whereas in France, you are getting the wines of France. And if you are in certain regions, like if I'm in the Bordeaux region of France, then I'm just getting Bordeaux. So I might not even be getting wines from the south of France or from the east of France. I'm just getting them from the region of which I'm in. They are very particular about and proud about their regions. So they will sell you what is local. And
yeah.
that is something that also transfers over to their food. The food that you get, the vegetables, the fruits, they're largely local and in season. So that's something that's very different. Um, I won't say that the French don't know as much about wine, but what's important to them as far as buying wine is different than what's important to an American. For a French person, they are more focused on the region it's from. They know the soil type, so they know the weather and they know the grapes that they enjoy. And so that is something that they are thinking about when they go to select their wine. Whereas, kind of in America or the American consumer, they're kind of just like, let me just grab something, maybe because I like this label, maybe because it looks fancy, or I heard somebody talk about that. They are largely buying wine based off of suggestion, other people's opinions, things like that.
Okay, thank you so much. And another
Mm-hmm.
question that we have is how can people directly invest in wine? Are there any wine indices, brands, or markets you look at for investments?
For investments, I would definitely say get a broker, somebody
Mm,
to help you with that, because if you if you're investing in it, you're not necessarily wanting to take possession of it. It's
yeah,
not like a piece of art. If you've invested in art, you can hang art on your wall and enjoy it and then still resell it.
yeah.
Once you invest in wine, you can't open it. It's not something you pull out and show your friends. Hey guys, look at this bottle. Like nobody cares. Like that's not necessarily art. You know what I mean? Like you take me near and look, I have this bottle from 1954.
Mhm.
Congratulations. I don't even know if that's really what it is or not. So
Right.
you don't have to show it to me. But you want to go through a broker because they would be able to verify it is what they say it is, verify that it was a good year, verify that the labeling and everything is correct, and also proper storage. Because you
Mm,
wouldn't want to store that in your home. You can't guarantee that the temperature is going to be right, the humidity will be correct, there won't be any vibrations or direct access, direct sunlight or direct light stream or anything like that.
mm,
So I would suggest going through a broker. There are various brokerage firms out there. You can look them up through the LiveX, LIV-EX. You can look them up through that. And you can also check out indices on that website to see what wines are hot, which things you should be investing in, which ones are great return on your investment, but you're also spending a lot of money now. And there's some other ones that are like, this is on the rise. Put in a little bit of money now, wait 15, 20 years, and then you get a good return on your investment.
wow, that's really interesting. And I know you've been doing wine tasting experiences as well in France. And so I've been wondering what your target demographic is usually when you're doing those sort of experiences, and what are people typically looking for when they book an experience with you?
The demographic is, of course, English speaking,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
one thing, French people will not listen to an American talk to them about their wine.
Mm.
No. Now, if I want to talk about American wines, fine. And because I've done that, I've done master classes on wines of New York, and then next year I'm doing a talk on wines from Virginia. So they will listen to me talk about that, but talk about a French wine, no. So my demographic, English speaking, native English speakers. And the age group is usually like maybe 35 to 60. It's a wide age range because we're talking tourists, people who have an interest in wine, people who have an interest in French wine, or people who have been to Paris before and want to do something else. They're like, all right, I've seen the Eiffel Tower, I've seen Notre Dame, I've been to the Arc, I've done the
Right.
river cruise. Let me do something else.
Mhm.
And so they find me and they're like, oh, a wine experience, let's do it. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, let's do it.
Interesting. So what does that usually entail when you say like a wine experience? Is it just having a few like different kinds of wine that you bring out and just having them try it on their own and then maybe giving them some information on it, or what does that look like?
What it looks like is we will go to a few wine bars in the city. There are some different neighborhoods where there are a couple wine bars that are close together. And so we'll go to a wine bar. I start them off always with the sparkling wine because I feel like people don't drink sparkling wine enough because sparkling wine is amazing. You should drink it more often, not just for a celebration. Those over 21, of course. So
Mhm.
there's that. Put that disclaimer in there. Those over 21. It's not
Right.
just for a special occasion. It's not just, oh, it's a wedding, it's a graduation, it's this. It's Saturday and you cleaned your whole house. Like,
Mhm.
let's celebrate. Let's drink a glass of sparkling wine. So I start with the sparkling wine, and then we'll talk a bit about sparkling wine in France versus champagne.
Mhm.
Then I will order a white wine, let them taste that. I have these aroma wheels, and we will go through the different aromas and the flavor profile, have them think about, like, really focus on what they're smelling and what they're tasting. And
Mhm.
I do that because a lot of times people just drink mindlessly. And then when they go to order a wine or buy one in a store, they don't quite know what they want, or
Mhm.
what they like. But if you focus when you're in front of me, a wine professional, and
Mhm.
then you can really talk through the different flavors of things you get, you'll understand what you like.
Yeah.
You might taste a wine that is a white wine that has apple and pear and maybe hints of melon and a bit of floral character to it. And you're like, I don't really like that. Okay, then I will have you try something that's maybe citrus with some lemon, some grapefruit, or something like that. You might like that style better. And
Yeah.
so when you figure that out, you can take that information to your wine shop next time you're in a restaurant and use that. I also have a scent kit, these aromas, and they're these little vials and they have aromas in them. And so you shake them up and you smell them. Then I have them go through smelling a couple of those so they can just think about the different kind of things that they would smell in wine. Some people
Mhm.
are really good at that. They're right away like popcorn, raspberry, violet. Like, some people are amazing at that. And other people are like, so it smells like something. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
All
it,
right.
it, it is something. So yes, it does smell like something. And so then we'll taste a couple more wines, go to a couple of different other wine bars. I'll have them try to order or something like that. And then, we take it from there.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And I was also wondering about the challenges in the wine industry and how does it remain resilient during economic downturns?
Because people always want to drink. People look
That
at
is
maybe
true.
not the luxury wine market that doesn't necessarily flourish in the economic downturn, but people just really, they look at it as kind of an escape, or they
Mhm.
look at it as a way to connect with people and have like a camaraderie with friends. And so drinking wine, sharing a glass, bottle, case, whatever it may
Yeah.
be, of wine, that really brings people together. So that is why wine is able to remain resilient
Mm,
economically.
that makes
The only problem I feel that's coming up with wine now is there seems to be a lot of talk around, um, there's a lot of sober curious and a lot of no alcohol and those kind of things. And that is something that is a concern in the wine industry, that more people, instead of talking moderation, which I think the conversation should be,
yeah.
people talking, no, there is no point in drinking alcohol. It serves no purpose in your life. Don't drink any alcohol, not even a drop. And I'm like, well, that's not the way. I think there is definitely a middle ground there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's definitely like a growing like mocktail type market. I've definitely seen that around here in Atlanta. Really
Absolutely.
interesting. But yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to like steer clear of alcohol more generally, which yeah, I could definitely see how that would damage the wine industry to some extent. And I know that you've traveled a decent a bit. And so I've been wondering like what sort of experiences have you had surrounding wine outside of France? And what have you taken away from those experiences?
It's interesting to see how other places do wine, especially somewhere this new world, because they have a newer approach and they're not so caught up in the tradition and in the idea of, well, this is how we've always done it. I went to South Africa a couple of years ago and did wine tastings there around the Stellenbosch region. One thing they consider them, they don't call them vineyards, they call them wine farms. So they're
Hmm.
these vast, wide open, there is vineyard area, but then they also are growing other things there. So that's the farming aspect of it. So that was something that was really fascinating to me. I went to Sicily a few months ago, and they are doing a lot with organic and biodynamic growing practices and really trying to lean heavy into that because the more pesticides, herbicides, and things like that you use on the vines and then the soil,
Yeah.
that starts to affect other things that grow, that affects the soil. And then once the soil is dead, you can't bring that back.
Yeah.
So being more conscious of what they're doing to it now. As far as experiences, wine on a boat is always going to win for me. If you have me on any type of boat, cruise, whatever, and you have wine and then a sunset, that's yeah. So we
Right.
did that in Sicily, and that wins. That wins
Yeah,
for
that
me.
sounds like a pretty good experience.
Yeah.
And also like more specifically talking about you and your own identity, while in France, have you found that being an American, specifically Black, has impacted the way that you're treated or valued as a sommelier, especially since the industry has not been very diverse and still isn't diverse?
Absolutely. But it's hard to say which of the things that I am is what they are against. I am American, I am a woman, and I am Black. So
Yeah.
all three of those together, I'm like, so they can use any excuse to say, like, oh, no, 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 it's just she's American. We just have the French people. That's not true because why would you just want to talk to each other?
Hmm.
So I have had those experiences. Or oh, you don't know anything about wine. You're American. Well, what
Yeah.
wines do you Americans know? And I've heard them make little remarks about women. Luckily, here women are very heavy into the marketing aspect of it and into the content creation, social media. So I can kind of skate past the women part on that.
Yeah.
And the American thing, they like the American approach
Mm.
when you're talking business, you're talking marketing, you're talking sales, you're talking how to get people in the door, what kind of experiences, what kind of visuals. That's an American. I kill at that every time. They love it and want to invite me on all their trips.
Yeah.
So, luckily for me, and this is the last thing I know, we're running out of time. When I first got here and really started in wine, I didn't speak French. So
Yeah.
when they would talk about me or would say certain things, I had no idea what they were saying. So it
Hmm.
didn't matter. That wasn't going to stop me because I don't understand.
Yeah.
And if you say something to me that I don't understand, like I'm not going to react. It does not hit the way you want it to. So I keep moving.
Mhm.
It, it's fine.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't suggest anybody else come here without speaking French. Yeah,
Right.
that was like the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But yeah.
Very resilient for that. I don't know if I would have that in me. But thank you so much for that sage advice. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in today to the Spelman Economics Club podcast and to those who joined via webinar. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and Spotify. And also don't forget to look up Professor Townsend and her website. And we'll be back with more episodes exploring the fascinating world of economics after fall break. Until next time, stay curious.